Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video we're going to be doing What If Andrew Was in the MCU Part 4. If you're not checked out the other 3 parts, go and check them out, they're on the channel right now. I'll leave a link to Part 1 in the description down below where you can go check that out if you have not seen it already. With that being said, let's get straight into today's video. A couple of months go by since Endgame and Peter has shaved off his beard. We start the movie with Peter and MJ hanging out as usual. It's quite reminiscent of that scene in Spider-Man 3 at the start of the movie. This movie starts out on a high note from the end of Endgame, but then drops right back down when we're introduced to the main problem that Peter faces in this movie. Peter and all his fears, he's been dealing with a slight PTSD issue. And the Sinister Six in this movie will represent the culmination of the story of Spider-Man and his problems that he's been building up since TASM 2. And it explodes in this film. He has had anxiety and he's afraid. There is a scene with Peter and MJ telling him how he should take a break and he's been feeling really down. Peter said that he's took a break from being Spider-Man before and he realized that he can't give up because of what Uncle Ben said. Then on the news, someone called the Shocker is robbing a store downtown and Peter must go. Spider-Man swings into action and tries to stop the Shocker but has flashbacks to Endgame and is slightly injured but then gets back up and beats the Shocker. The Shocker goes to prison. This scene will represent how the whole world depends on Spider-Man now after the death of Tony Stark, and how the weight of the world is now on his shoulders and he suffers from this thought. The gentleman from the previous films then reveals himself. He reveals to be a rival of Tony Stark and that his company was taken down because of Stark and he was outselling everything he was doing. He took a shareholder in Oscorp before Norman died to produce supervillains to draw Iron Man out and destroy Stark's empire as he was jealous of him. This was inspired after the incidents like Lizard, Electro and Goblin, etc. So then created the Rhino using the same Oscorp tech, then hired the Chameleon and now the Shocker. This will then tie in TASM 2 and TASM 1 more into the MCU as these will be the most disconnected films. The main theme and similarity here is that he's always been hindered by one man, Spider-Man. Spider-Man has always been in his way from taking down Stark and accomplishing his goals. So this becomes personal. He hates Spider-Man and has started to use the tech to his advantage. It's revealed that his real name is Roderick Kingsley. But now the legacy of Tony Stark now lives on through heroes like Spider-Man who have stepped up to the big leagues. He has the motivation and it's time for the final battle. Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six. We then have a scene with Peter when he meets an old friend, Eddie Brock, who is back in town. Eddie and Peter catch up. Eddie says that Peter isn't the same man he remembers him to be when they were kids. A conversation here will be had about Peter's parents, since the whole untold story aspect of the Amazing Spider-Man still exists in this universe. This will be a good way to wrap up that story by introducing Eddie Brock, who can put a closure on that part of Peter's life. Peter introduces Eddie to MJ and them 3 hit it off. They're kind of like Harry, Peter and MJ in the Raimi movies. They're kind of like that trio. When they're all hanging out together, Peter will have some kind of mental breakdown due to the anxiety that he's been dealing with recently, and he doesn't want to be seen as weak, so he runs off. We then get a scene where Peter and MJ talk. MJ says that even though he's having a hard time, he couldn't just ditch like that. Peter says that she doesn't understand what he's been going through. No one does. They fight between each other and then they split off from each other. MJ says whatever they have is over. They are done. From MJ's perspective, all they do is fight. This right here will set up MJ's character arc for this film, which will be that she has to learn to understand other people, especially people like Peter, because what he's been through since Infinity War. We then get a scene where MJ meets up with Eddie and tells him all about it as them two have become good friends. We get a calm scene where Peter is out in the costume swinging. He lands on a building and just thinks to himself. It's almost a calm before the storm type scene. Peter goes home and sleeps. The symbiote bonds with Peter in his sleep and amplifies his stress and PTSD and it forms into anger. This is the symbiote from Endgame, by the way, that was attached to Rhodey's shoe. The symbiote will be an embodiment of Peter's anger and hatred that he's been building up. It will act as a representation in this movie. Mary Jane is really upset and Eddie is there to comfort her. Eddie tells her she isn't wrong in thinking this as Eddie knew Peter as someone entirely different before the snap as well. He doesn't recognize him now. They relate and bond over this and Eddie and MJ will start to flirt. There's a little bit of a thing going on there. Then back with the gentleman. Himself and Dimitri from the Amazing Spider-Man 3 will have a talk and decide to get the team together. He then plans to break out the villains like Electro, Rhino, Shocker, Dimitri's half-brother Kraven, and of course, Harry Osborn using Oscorp access codes. Them 5, along with Dimitri, who has now gone under the name Chameleon, will make up the Sinister Six. He plans to appoint Harry Osborn as the team leader, but there's a catch. We get a little bit of a glimpse at what Harry and the Gentleman's relationship is when the Gentleman reveals that he is the one that produces some form of cure for Harry that is related to the cure that we saw in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. We then cut back to Peter as Eddie goes to talk to him as he's really upset MJ. And Eddie, now feeling a certain way about MJ, now has developed a little crush and is slightly protective, being the character that Eddie Brock is. He goes to Peter civilly, however, but Peter is having none of it. He argues that no one should treat him this way when they don't know what he's been going through, and because of the symbiote, Peter pushes Eddie up against a wall. Eddie tries to fight back, but Peter floors him. Eddie is older than him, and Peter was always scroungy. He was a kid. He was never be able to do something like this before. Why can he do it now? And Eddie's mad. He storms off, and these two guys' friendship is now over. We then have a similar scene to the Rikers Island breakout in Spider-Man PS4, as the Gentleman starts to break out a bunch of inmates as a distraction to break out the villains. Spider-Man goes there and with the help of the symbiote, contains a lot of the inmates. He fights Electro and Kraven, as those are the only ones who don't require suits for their powers. Spider-Man beats Kraven and he escapes whilst he goes after Electro. Electro and Spider-Man fight, and then the Gentleman calls them off to go and regroup. Spider-Man with the symbiote is also really overpowered, but he almost kills Kraven in their battle. This is the first glimpse at redemption for Peter as he realizes that this is not who Spider-Man is. He almost has someone in his head telling him to kill him, but he doesn't. After their successful escape, the Gentleman is questioned. Why would any of these guys work together? The Gentleman says that he wants Spider-Man wiped out of the picture as much as everyone else does here. Spider-Man has taken something from everyone there, and everyone has a reason to take him down. They all receive their tech as the Gentleman has ties to Oscorp. We then get a scene with JJJ when he comments on the destruction at Rikers and said that Spider-Man couldn't even stop the big villains from escaping, and that he can never live up to the Tony Stark and Avengers level threats. This fuels Peter's anger even more and regresses him further. This makes Peter realize what he's become though. He reads his phone and he has texts from MJ and he's really sad, and MJ's really sad. Peter sends a voicemail to MJ that he's really sorry and that they should meet and talk things over. This is the realization moment for Peter. He realizes how much of a dick he's become and how much the symbiote has influenced him. He fought his childhood best friend. He almost killed Kraven, and he's hurt MJ. We then get a scene where MJ goes to Peter's house to speak with Peter, but he's not there. And Aunt May says that she doesn't know where he is half the time and that he hasn't been home in a while. MJ meets with Eddie Brock again. Eddie says that she shouldn't worry about Peter anymore. She is with a guy that makes her happy. MJ says that Peter was misunderstood though and thinks he was going through something that not many people could comprehend. Eddie says not to try and justify with him that he's a dick. MJ, knowing that he is Spider-Man, knows what he's been through, and MJ now comes to a realization and her arc is complete. She has to level with him instead of fighting with him. Something that Eddie can't understand, and because he has fought Peter physically, he has regressed past that. Eddie storms off and doesn't understand and says that if she's going to linger over Peter, Eddie can't be her second choice. Eddie is blindsided by the real facts here. Granted, he doesn't know that Peter is Spider-Man, but still. Eddie storms off. We then cut to Peter taking off the symbiote as it's not good for him. He is at a church and he bangs it against the bell just like in Spider-Man 3. The symbiote is weak after leaving Peter, which was such a strong host, so much hate for the symbiote to linger off of and amplify. But Peter has learned now he can't let the hate, anger, aggression and all his deep dark emotions consume him, which was represented through the symbiote. The Six have devised their plan. The Gentleman wants to overwhelm Spider-Man and then finally delivering the final blow to seal the deal before taking back what's rightfully his. And since Stark is already dead and out of the picture, and like I said earlier, the legacy of Stark lives on through heroes like Spider-Man, so they are respected by the public and by a notion that Stark once created, that the Avengers have done the world a favor, the universe a favor. But Roderick was never spared. He was thrown under the bus by Stark, and now Spider-Man is the one and only who stands in his way. His plan since the beginning is finally coming to fruition, and Spider-Man has always been the one to stop him. But now it's time. We cut to MJ talking to Peter. Peter apologizes for everything he's done, and MJ explains how she's been so worried about him and that she should have understood what he was going through rather than fighting back. Peter explains how he was a dick and he let it consume him, and then out of nowhere the Daily Bugle reports with J. Jonah Jameson that the supervillains that escaped from Rikers are causing havoc and looking for Spider-Man. Peter knows it. He knows this is it. MJ tells him he can't go because he'll die. There's so many of them. He almost did once in Infinity War. How could he be so lucky again? Peter says he's gotta go. Because there are no more Iron Mans anymore. Tony is dead, Cap is gone, the Avengers don't exist like they used to. The weight of the world and the future of the world hangs on Spider-Man's shoulders, and it's beginning to look more like that ever since the Civil War fallout. It's almost looked like Spider-Man has always been the one to deal with the bigger problems constantly getting more and more serious. And it's all down to him. With great power comes great responsibility, and Peter wears the red and blue suit as he swings off and he leaves MJ to go and fight his greatest battle yet. Spider-Man in the classic red and blue suit goes off to fight the Sinister Six. He battles Rhino and Shocker first. He webs them down. He beats Rhino by allowing him to charge into a wall. 2 down, 4 to go. Electro is next. Spider-Man knows the plant trick won't work on him a second time, so leads him out to the coast. Spider-Man lands on the water, and when Electro tries to zap him, he makes contact with the water and fries him out. Then a bomb comes his way and blows up in Spider-Man's face. It's the Chameleon. Craven then runs in and spears Spider-Man, hurting him even more. Craven says, "You're not so powerful without the black suit, are you, Spidey?" Then they fight, and it's a tough one, but Spider-Man manages to take down Craven. But Spider-Man is extremely injured. Spider-Man is tired. Then he finally takes down Dimitri and will crack a joke like it's been 5 years or whatever. And then we will hear the cackle. And Harry Osborn in a classic-looking Green Goblin suit will fly down. This time, Peter is injured and hurt. This fight won't be as easy as it was in TASM 2. But everything lingers off this fight. The death of Gwen Stacy, the entire franchise, every battle that Spider-Man has faced led up to this moment. Another confrontation with Harry Osborn, another confrontation with the Green Goblin. This time Peter is injured and hurt. Harry says how all this, everything that has happened, it's all his fault. It is revealed that the only reason that Harry complied with the Gentleman is because he was the one feeding him the cure. He needed the Gentleman for his Osborn disease. And that Harry never wanted this to happen, but he needs Spider-Man dead. Which means these two characters come full circle. In TASM 2, Harry needed Peter alive for his blood to stay alive himself, and now in this one needs him dead to stay alive. They fight one last time. Harry versus Peter, friend versus friend, Goblin versus Spider. It's a brutal fight. They fight to the very end, and Harry Osborn dies, just like Norman Osborn did in the Spectacular Spider-Man. He dies by his own hand due to a mistake by his overwhelming aggression. Peter screams, "No!" But Harry is dead. But at least it's over. The Six is no more. All the villains get taken back to jail, and Roderick Kingsley is finally arrested for his crimes. Spider-Man stepped up to the big role. He stepped up like Iron Man would have done, like a true Avenger. He isn't an Avenger, but he's grown up. He isn't a kid from Queens anymore. He's a big-time superhero. He's the world's greatest superhero. We then have a scene to finish off the film with Peter and MJ hugging and crying on each other's shoulder. And cut. Post-credit scene, and Eddie goes to church to find the symbiote. He bonds with it, and Venom is born. This allows for Sony's Venom spin-off movie that they were doing if they were going to continue the Amazing franchise, whilst also it taking place inside of the MCU. But with that being said, that is it for today's video, and that is it for this series. Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, hit the bell next to the subscribe button to not miss any more content. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching once more, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.